Hey everybody, this is Jay Eisenicke, and this is episode 4 of the Latent Force Prepared Defensive Action podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk personal safety with our special guest and good friend, Deputy Rich.
Three, two, one.
This is the Latent Force Prepared Defensive Action podcast. We believe there's no defensive situation so bad that your lack of training can't make it worse.
We're on a mission to cut the crap in the firearms industry and bring you only the most powerful, impactful, and useful discussions and tips on mindset, gear, and personal defense that is designed to make you a more informed and effective gunfighter.
Guys, gals, and submarine racers, here are your hosts, Jay Eisenicke and Mike Garza. All right, hey everybody, thanks for joining us today for the episode 4 of the Latent Force Prepared Defensive Action podcast. My name is Jay Eisenicke, and joining me today, as always, is my co-host, Mike Garza. How are you today, Mike?
I'm pretty good. Now, do we really kind of call it 4 or like 3A or B? Because this is kind of not like our regular scheduled podcast.
We're so early on in this thing. I don't think, do we have anything this regular? I don't know.
But we might need to start being like at Monday, 7:00, Sunday. I don't know.
I would hope so. Well, that's a good point to talk about, is we were talking about the fact that, thank you to everybody that listens, is we went, what was it?
I would
5 times?
I would just say like a 300% boost.
Yeah, we had like a
something.
500% increase in downloads of our podcast. Now, I understand when you go from 1 download to 5, that 500% is pretty impressive.
It was Russia.
Yeah,
it was Russia.
They hacked. It was the hackers. But anyways, no, on a serious note, we did actually have a substantial increase in listeners over the last couple of weeks. So we appreciate everybody that's tuning in. So we have with us today we have a guest, and he was nice enough to be voluntold to join us today. And so what we wanted to talk about a little bit in this episode today was to go and maybe, I know we're only 4 into it, but revisit slightly a previous podcast that had to do with home defense and defending yourself in the home, and kind of clarify and give some better things to think about in your personal security that I think that are important. So we've brought with us is what we would consider the expert on the topic. And Rich, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us your background, so everybody that's listening kind of knows that the information you're sharing with us is solid, and take it to the bank.
Absolutely. Jay, thank you for having me. And Mike, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be told that I was going to be doing this today and not really have much of an option out. But I look forward to being able to add to some security to the folks out there. I've been a deputy with the Sheriff's Office in Arizona for about 27 years, working various different assignments. And recently this past year, I received a national certification in Dept, and that's crime prevention through environmental design. And what that does, whether it's commercial or residential security, we receive a lot of in-depth training. It's actually there's a week-long basic course and then a week advanced course. And it gives us just insight and knowledge to be able to go out and survey properties and do threat assessments on, again, be it residential or commercial properties. So one of the previous podcasts, Jay and Mike were talking about security and an individual being assaulted in an apartment complex. So Dept doesn't apply necessarily to freestanding residential structures. Again, it can apply to a commercial structure, i.e. a multiple occupancy structure like an apartment complex, safety precautions that one should take. And what Dept does really harp on people to do is the 2 foot, 6 foot rule. And what that is any shrubbery, any environmental things outside the residence should be no higher than 2 feet, and then your trees should fall or hang no lower than 6 foot. That gives an individual walking or driving the view of a property, and they can see clearly to the structure, because again, it would be hard for an individual to hide too much below 2 feet. And then that 6 feet gives a clear view of windows and so forth, walls around the structure. Another important thing with Dept is proper lighting. There's various different lighting one could have out there. There's halogen, there's LED, there's the I can't remember the one incandescent, but lighting is an important thing when it comes to security because it casts a shadow or it'll cast glare when one's looking into it or driving through it. So that has an effect on what one can see. Also, a big thing with Dept is...
So basically, you're just trying to drive shadows out of the front of your property.
Correct. You want to be able to have a clear view, so lighting is a really important thing. And unfortunately, some people take a cheaper route in commercial structures, be it apartment complex, a multiple occupancy residency, or a commercial building for a business. They sometimes tend to go a little bit cheaper, but actually having proper lighting is going to save them money in the long run.
And one of the things that is spotlights. That's really where the problem is that people will just have a spot and it creates...
Look at my tree.
Yeah. And it creates so many shadows around it. So uplighting versus downlighting versus a spotlight, it creates different types of shadows and it makes it harder for you to conceal yourself if you point the lights in the right direction.
Absolutely. And the point you just brought up is, yes, uplighting, downlighting, spotlighting, depending what you're trying to light and what effect you're trying to accomplish or goal you're trying to accomplish. There's different things you need to look at. You just can't have one specific lighting and one specific type of lighting that will cover the whole property and do it correctly. You need to have different lightings in different areas doing certain things.
Yeah, you tend to see that a lot in gas stations now. I know there was a big initiative in Phoenix anyways, and that's the areas that I live in, where the gas stations now have super lit the pump areas and everything to drive those shadows out of there to really get good, clear pictures of bad guys doing bad things on their CCTV cameras. So.
And absolutely, and subconsciously, if we all would sit back and think, when we're driving down the road and we're going to get gas, we are attracted to that well-lit gas station because we feel more comfortable and we don't realize that. So you're going to pull into that gas station opposed to the one next door that's a little bit darker and shadier looking.
And shadier, we mean light, maybe not shady establishments.
Right.
Correct.
Exactly.
Correct. And another also thing with Dept is a grand entry, be it your apartment front door, your residential front door, your commercial building, having that grand entry well lit, clean around it, your ingress egress area. If that's visible and clear to the public, you're less likely to be affected. A criminal is less likely to go to that area because it can be seen from all angles and from everywhere and from a distance.
Sure, that makes total sense. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot here and ask you an off-the-wall question. So, what do you think about? I have an area in the front of my house where I can put a metal gate area, so I can stop people from getting to my front door.
Is that bad? You're asking?
Yeah. Would that be a good thing, a bad thing?
Personal choice, as long as you, again, depending upon the area you're trying to secure, how high is that fence? Is it going to be a detriment to you if you're trying to get out of your structure and away from your structure? But is it also going to reach the goal of someone trying to get into your structure, into your front door?
Right.
So you have to look at it both ways. And it's a personal choice.
Indeed. Good thoughts.
Anyway, another thing you had mentioned previously in one of the podcasts I was listening to was that tripwire. And again, getting back with Dept, a tripwire for someone should be when they're driving up to their residence, coming home from work, is maybe that individual that they don't recognize that's standing out in front of the house or walking somewhere close to their residence. If they don't feel comfortable and the hair standing up on the back of their neck and they're asking themselves that question, hey, who is that person? That should be a cue to them. Hey, maybe I'm just going to keep on driving past my residence and see what they do. I'll watch them on my mirror, or I'll pull over down next to my neighbor 2 houses down and see which way they're going. Because you don't know, maybe that individual has been casing your residence and has been watching you, knowing you're going to come home at 5 o'clock every day and expecting you to be there, watching you walk into that garage after you parked your car in the driveway, and then they're going to follow you in before that garage door shuts. So if you're asking yourself that question, then you need to be asking yourself another question and continue on and be safe.
Yeah, and I think that there's one of the things that and I'll put a link to it in the show notes, is I think that a book that every person should read is The Gift of Fear. And that book is a great book that tells you need to listen to that little voice in your head, because it's out there to keep you safe. And unfortunately, we think that because society is thinking that way about somebody and their behavior, the way they look, that it makes it wrong. And so we say, well, we shouldn't think that way. When in reality is those little spidey senses, a little hair on the back of your neck is trying to keep you safe. And so we should be listening to it. So if you haven't read The Gift of Fear, it's a book that you should pick up and you need to read, because and then once you're done reading it, give it to a member of your family so they understand it as well. And I think it's important. And they go through a lot of case studies of actual victims very much after the fact, and they do some to see if they picked up any of the cues, and they help them to identify, well, here's where some of the cues that you didn't even know about. So it's a good one. So definitely agree. And the tripwires that we talked about before is that it starts very close. It starts within arm's length. Then it starts arm's length plus, and then it goes to that threat zone, which is the Tueler drill that we talked about. And then it goes out to, like we said, that 100-foot ring, and to where stuff's in there. Like you said, if somebody's suspicious, they probably are. They don't necessarily have to be a suspicious looking person. It's just their behaviors, their actions are suspicious. And if they're inside that tripwire, then you need to have a defensive plan. And like you're saying, Rich, if it's driving around the block and seeing what they do when you drive by, then that's part of your plan, but you need to think that way.
Jay, it's interesting you mentioned that book, because as we sit here, that book sits home on my desk there. And I mentioned the name of a seminar I went to, and I'm not affiliated with them whatsoever, and not receiving any benefits from them, but Gavin Dept. I was also certified in threat vulnerability assessments 2 years ago, and that's one of the books that was handed to us and signed by Gavin Dept. And phenomenal book. I do recommend, as Jay does, everyone to read it and pass it along so you can get as many people introduced to that information that's within it. It's very valuable.
Now, speaking of tripwires, I'm going to share a little bit of a story that has to do with me that it's somewhat funny. Well, okay, it's not because somebody unfortunately lost their life, but a little bit of the story is slightly interesting.
So let me do a disclaimer here. Jay has been drinking, and that's why he thought it was funny. So, okay. All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jay.
Okay. All right. So this comes to us from San Diego, California, the great state of California. There was a recent hammer-wielding attack. The attacker beat a man to death at a McDonald's in San Diego. And
now we're leaving that in there, folks. I'm sorry. I'm going to force Jay not to edit that out. If you listen closely, the cuckoo clock is cuckooing. But go ahead with the hammer story.
Okay, so if you're not distracted by the cuckoo clock in the background, I'll just go ahead and continue with my story, which is he gets beat to death by a guy at a McDonald's in San Diego. So they got in an argument with this gentleman, got in an argument with a stranger at the bus stop, and he beat him to death. And witnesses thought he was wearing a Santa hat, but it turns out his hair was colored red and in the shape of a cone. And he was arrested for murder after a brief struggle with law enforcement. And Mike, you and I were talking about this discussion about knives. And I don't, how long have firearms been around? I'm not an expert as far as the history, but I'll tell you, it's probably been a couple of 100 years, right? Mm-hmm. But how many years, centuries have we had swords and blades and all this type of thing? Millions and millions of people, generations of people have been killed with knives. They are effective. They do work. And so when people say, hey, he just had a knife, why would you shoot somebody that had a knife? Well, thousands of years of destruction and maiming and killing has proven that blades are effective tools against human beings. So you have to pay attention to that distance that people are able to strike you with a blade. And that's why it's important to know that kill zone is within arm's reach. If you have a threat that's that close, it's a pretty dangerous position to be in. And here was a situation where a guy is beaten to death, and he allowed somebody at a bus stop close enough to beat him to death. And so did he have a defensive plan in place that had those tripwires to say, this guy, obviously to me, and I'm just going to go based on the description that they gave. If I see a guy with red hair and it's shaped in the shape of a cone, I mean, he's on my radar if he's within any of those tripwires for me. So I just think you got to pay attention. It goes back to that understanding. Maybe he's the nicest guy and he was just going to a Christmas party. I don't know. But still, the point is that it's suspicious in the circumstances and you need to pay attention to those things.
If I can add to that, Jay, in the law enforcement training that I've gone through in the beginning of my career and things that I've remembered since is, that tripwire, we were taught initially that, 1 foot out, anything within that 1 foot is intimate space. Anything within 3 foot is personal space. And from 21 foot to the 3 foot is public space. And that's, again, as you'd mentioned previously also in one of your podcasts, is that the average person can move from 21 feet out up to you before you can draw your weapon. So you've got to pick a point, no matter where you are, what you're doing, not live in fear, but pick your point that you're going to react, whether it's move away from an individual, whether you're going to take a defensive stance, whether you're going to take that defensive stance and draw a weapon in defense. But you've got to pick where your tripwire is. And is it someone? Are you comfortable with letting someone in your intimate space? Are you comfortable letting someone in personal space? Or from that 21 foot out, are you comfortable?
Yeah, and it's funny that you guys bring up the knives and your space, right? So number one, I rarely let anyone in my personal space, including my wife, because she's very dangerous. But as far as knives and guns go, don't take my word for it. Go look up the FBI statistic. Knives, shovels, blunt objects outrank guns tenfold. It's because it's the simple fact. You can go pick up a shovel right now in someone's garage, right? You might not be a gun person, but you can go get a hammer. You can go get a knife. You can go get a kitchen knife, right? So when people say, oh, well, you just had a knife. Why didn't you, we just got done doing this at SHOT Show. Why didn't you just shoot the knife out of his hand? Number one, if you shoot guns, go to the range, draw a knife on your little silhouette target, and just shoot the knife at 7 yards. And let me know how that works for you. Let me know how much time you took to set up your sights and press the trigger correctly. I guarantee you it's a lot harder than you think. And that's on an object that's not moving. Now try and shoot the knife or the hand out of the moving suspect's hand. It's not going to work. So again, don't take our words for the FBI statistic. Go look it up. Go see that guns are not the evil. It's not the thing that everyone thinks is going to kill America. For the love of Pete's sake, right? And profiling, while we're at it, works. All this thing about how, oh, well, that guy just likes to be artistic or whatever. Listen, fine. If the guy's artistic and he's going to comply with commands by, hey, how are you doing, sir? You know what's going on? And the guy seems normal, the guy or gal, then we're going to move on, right? But if you ask a guy with pointed red hair with a hammer in his hand and he goes, well, F you, cop, we're coming, then that the game is on. So you can easily tell right off the bat, who's right and who's wrong. By all means, some people are, normal and they just like red hair and a pointy cone. And again, we don't have a problem with them as long as they react to the normal questions.
Sure, you bet. And I mean, for the average person, outside of law enforcement, just the average person is that, we say in our classes is that you have to own your voice, and you have to, when people get into those zones, we were talking about the intimate space, the personal space, and the public space, is that people have a problem. They think it's rude to yell at somebody. And if somebody is in a public place, in your public space, and you feel uncomfortable with them, then there's no problem with yelling at them.
Speak
telling
up.
them to get away,
Yep.
Get back, draw attention to yourself and to them, because the criminal element doesn't want to be identified. That's why they hide in the shadows as much as possible. And so we want to make sure that when you have those situations, is you speak up and say something, because it is a massive deterrent to that stuff happening. And I think that people are, I don't even want to say embarrassed, but they feel that it's rude that they may insult somebody who truly has good intentions. And so, although it's not nefarious in any way, they yell at somebody, and now they're just, oh, you're just that crazy person that walks down the street yelling at people for no reason. So
when we teach a CCW class at C2, right? That's a plug for C2. I love that. David, our trainer, that's the first thing we say. If you're a woman and you're putting stuff in the trunk in the mall, and there's some guy coming behind you, yell at him. Say, hey, get away from me. I don't want you over here. And then, okay, so what? You made a mistake. You'll probably never see that guy ever again anyway. So what does it matter?
Right. And that brings up a great point. And Rich, we were talking about some of the things that I thought were really cool about some of the trends of what criminals are actually doing. You're talking about parking your car and going to the mall and doing those type of things that they're actually doing with your vehicles when you leave them with them. So maybe you can kind of expand on that a little bit.
Well, yeah, criminals, we, the pro-gun people or the pro, the patriot people, as we're thinking to how to protect ourselves, you have these criminals out there that are working on how to affect you, steal from you, burglarize you, assault you. So some things you have to be aware of out there is, and I'm not picking on hourly employees, or I'm not picking on any specific job classification out there, but the facts of life is, when you take your car someplace, as Jay sort of mentioned, you go to a car wash, or you're going to maybe a quick lube place, or you're going to valet parking. Some of those folks that are there are younger generation. They don't make a large hourly wage, and they're trying to find ways to augment their income. So they work with other people in cahoots, and what they'll do is, let's take the car wash, for example. A thing that pops into my mind is in the Phoenix area years ago, there was numerous folks working on car washes together, and when an individual would come into a car wash, they would open the glove box, look at the registration, because it was not registered to a post office box. Unfortunately, people would register it to their home address, and they would let their buddies know, hey, so-and-so's at the car wash. They're probably going to be here for about 30 minutes to an hour. They're getting their car detailed. So they would send their partners over to a house, and chances are no one was home, so they would burglarize his house. Well, it took about a year and a half of investigative work before they had uncovered this ring and what was occurring until they had stopped it. But obviously, in the meantime, there were hundreds and hundreds of people affected. But, what a great thought by these individuals, you're at the car wash, you're detained for an hour getting your car detailed, and they've got free run of your house. And with that said, the average burglar is in a house a minute to a minute and a half because they know right where to go, where you're probably hiding your jewels or where you're hiding your weapons. So you've got to think outside the box and not keep your jewelry in the same place as has been done in the past and your weapons under the bed or in the closet. You got to think outside the box. But more importantly, I would think about registering your vehicles to a post office box. It's well worth that $20 or $30 a year you might pay to have all your information, go into a post office box rather than a residential address.
Yeah, and I mean, and those are other things to think about too, is parking garages. So you may take your car in and go to those parking garages.
Valet people.
And the valets, and they have access to your car. We talked about it earlier, and the other podcast was the garage door openers. So not only do I have somebody that has access to where I live because I've dropped it off to them, and I'm a captive audience, if you will. If I know you're valet in your car, you're probably going to be here for a while. So I now have your registration, and I can certainly give that address to the criminal along with your garage door opener. Have that access. They can be back before, you even are done watching your movie or having dinner.
Absolutely, Jay. That's another big thing. Most people put their garage door opener where? They hang it on the sun visor, or they'll put it on the little map compartment there on the side of the door. And we're probably all guilty, but we've either flipped down the mirror and the garage door opener has popped off, or you've gotten in and out of the car and knocked it off that map thing. So by the time you discover that your garage door opener is gone, or by the time you get home, you're not going to think about it. You're going to go get another one. You're probably not going to reprogram it. And they're going to come by at some time when they know that your vehicle is not parked in the garage or in the driveway because they know what vehicle make you have. And that's when they're going to open your garage door and go inside your house.
Sure, absolutely.
While we're talking about garage doors, maybe this might not be maybe you know or don't know, and maybe Rich can back me up. The garage doors that have the windows in the middle of the garage on the top. So if you notice how your garage door works, there's a little red lever that's right there by the front of the garage door. It's an emergency hatch in case you need to open or close your garage door when there's no power. Well, what happens is burglars see those windows, and all they have to do is get a hanger, slip it in between the top of the garage door and the roof, and they can hook the red latch and pull on that. And now they have access to your garage, they can just open up. Like there's no lock or anything. And again, if you're not locking your garage door to your house, now they've just got access to your house.
Mike, you're absolutely correct. That takes literally about 5 seconds to reach that garage or that hanger above the garage door. You just put a little pressure on it, you reach, and you pull that emergency lever, which is there for a good reason. It's there so you can get out of your house if the house is on fire or you lose electric or so forth and so on. But it also gives the criminal access within seconds. So what did I do? I snipped my wire and I zip tied my thing, the locking mechanism up there, so you can't disengage it by any means, really. But I also have mentally made a note of that. All my family members are aware, and I do keep a tool handy close by that if I need to open that zip tie or cut the zip tie, it's there, and then we can open up the garage door, and it's easily reachable. But I would suggest people, take that little red thing off, secure that, and secure your residence.
Yeah, the other easy way too is you can get, if you like icicles or snow from Christmas time, you get the little can and you just frost your glass that's there in front of your garage door. So again, little things like that, and that now you have tips and tricks in your tool bag that you can just, what is that, $5 for the can? And now you've just fortified your home just a little bit more.
Absolutely. That glass is decorative. It looks good from the outside, but there's ways you can secure what people can see on the inside and not affect the aesthetic value.
Good point. So back to you, Jay.
Wow, thanks.
But you bring up a lot of good points about, personal security. We can go on, and we can talk about these topics as we sit here and think about them. and it's a no cost fix for most of these home security issues.
What about today at SHOT Show? We were walking by, and it's funny because we just talked about the last podcast about the 3M film that went over your windows for your house. Right. And as the demo was going on, I pointed to Rich. I'm like, "Hey, that's what we were just talking about, the film. Do you have any idea or thoughts behind that 3M film?"
Well, anything you can do to secure your residence is worth it, and not specifically looking at 3M film, because I'm sure there's others out there. And there's different levels of security that anyone can bring to their residence. But does that help? Absolutely. And the aesthetic value is well worth what that offers, because it doesn't change the look of your residence. It doesn't make it look like a fortress. It gives you that normal look. But if anyone can put any type of a covering on their windows, be it a security screen, the 3M film that offers that ballistic protection, so to say, not so much from a bullet, but from someone hitting it with a bat or a 2x4 or a pipe, or if you have that metal screening that goes over your window, as long as you can get out of your residence and those features are in place, that you're safe in the event there was a fire or some other emergency. Anything you can do like that to secure your residence and not allow someone in that doesn't belong there is well worth an investment. And a lot of insurance companies actually will give you discounts if you secure your residence through certain means, be it an alarm system, be it security screening, and so forth.
And one of the other things that, and I posted this up on our Facebook page, was I think sometimes people hold too much value or too much guarantee in security devices. My favorite is the chain on your door. And yeah, as they point to my front door with the same thing on it. Yes. but I also have a deadbolt. So
and a dog.
And a very big dog that keeps people out. But if you travel a lot and they have those in hotel rooms, I posted up a video of how simple it is with two pieces of rubber band and a piece of tape to break into a door that has that chain. Not only can you kick the door open, but that's noisy. Is you can do it with it very simply. So you have to think that you can't rely on just any old security thing that's out there. You got to look at it. And I mean, to put that's the only thing between you and the threat is pretty scary. So you have to be thinking a little differently. Now, I've traveled a lot in the past, and one of the really, and Mike, I know you and I have talked about this, is there is a great little tool that you jam under your door. So if you're traveling, it weighs less than a pound. You stick it in your suitcase and you wedge it under the door. I don't know if you guys ever did this in the past. When I was a kid, we used to penny stack doors. And so we'd do pranks around the school.
I would never break the law, Jay.
Yeah. We were little kids. We didn't know. And you'd take like a stack of pennies, like 5 pennies, you push on the bottom of the door and you'd stick it in between the door jamb and the door. And it put so much pressure on the door, the bolt, that you couldn't open the door. And so whoever was in there was stuck in there. It was fantastic. It was a lot of fun. And so this kind of works on that same principle, is that you stick it in underneath the door and the floor and the carpet, and you screw it down and it wedges that door so somebody can't get in. So you can't, it's just another, again, can it be defeated? Yes. But we talked about is that what you're trying to do is give yourself time to react to those entries and attempted entries. And so, just that's what the film does, is gives you time. And so you got to be thinking about just looking around. Some of this stuff is just, just doesn't work, and it doesn't help. So you got to come up with another plan that is better.
Jay, you bring up a good point. People can't rely on one security feature. They got to have multiple steps, multiple layers of security. And not that you need to live in fear or be paranoid, but just the facts of life are, if you want to secure yourself, you can't rely on one device. You may have that chain, which doesn't do much, but have that deadbolt, have that other feature that doesn't allow someone to push that door open. So yeah, it's not just one feature you rely on. You got to rely on multiple layers of security, and of course, being aware and alert of your surroundings. That's number one.
Okay, so now I'm gonna put Rich on the spot because I think people are misconceived when someone dials 911. Number one, do they talk to a police officer?
Normally, when you dial 911, the first person you will get will be a police agency. So if it's a medical emergency or a fire emergency, they're going to hold you on the line. They're not going to disconnect with you, and they're going to connect with the fire department and then transfer you to them once that fire dispatcher or medical emergency dispatcher answers.
And then next, how much time does it take for an officer to get to your house when the poop is hitting the fan?
Varies across the country, and it varies city to city, of course. It depends how busy a specific area is. Most police agencies probably realistically try to rely on a 3-minute to 7-minute response. Realistically, if that officer's sitting in the car at the station's driveway and when they get the call, you might get that 3-minute to 7-minute response. But if they're on another call, along with, say, their partners, and they're tied up at a large accident across the town, and you're on the other end, well, there's going to be a delay from distance. What traffic is there that may be holding them up, getting to you? What are other issues, be it environmental issues, rain, snow, that's causing another time delay? So again, they try for that 3-minute to 7-minute response, but it could be longer. And sometimes it's unfortunate when it's an extreme emergency, but it's just the way it happens.
So, and basically the point that I'm driving at, boys and girls, is that when we talk about these striker plates on doors, when we talk about the 3M film on glass, when we talk about the dog barking, what we're buying is time.
Absolutely.
And that's really what we're trying to impose on you. Don't rely on that one level of security. Get multiple layers so that you're buying yourself time to deal with the situation.
Absolutely, because again, that officer could be outside your front door when you call 911 because they could be on your street for another reason, be it an emergency or just a community service reason. Or again, they all could be tied up on the other side of town, and what's between you and them causes delay, and each factor that is involved causes delay.
The other thing I hear a lot too is, oh, well, I don't need a cop. I have a gun. I'll take care of the situation myself. And my answer or my rebuttal to that is, well, it's not always going to be you. I would love to be everywhere at the same time that I need to be at to deal with the situation. But a prime example is like right now. I'm here in Nevada, and my wife is alone in the home with a big German Shepherd, so don't get any ideas, bad guys, or ISIS. And then my mom, too, she's alone. I could try to hold a straight face, but these guys are laughing. But, again, my mom is alone. That's who you really – I mean, I totally get it. I totally get that you're the macho alpha guy, but it's not always about you. It's about your family. It's about the people that you're not next to. So, again – a little bit of a break to the men and women in blue and the firefighters and all the first responders, EMTs and ambulance drivers. That's a kick in the face for you guys. I know they don't like being called ambulance drivers.
So I'm going to ask a question. This is, I guess, personally speaking, and maybe I'm the only one that does it, but does anybody else think about in an emergency and some disaster happens and you're not with your family and how you're going to get back together and how you're going to communicate? And I mean, it goes to your point is that I think about that all the time is I'm like, well, my daughter's in California right now and we're here. And if something happens, how am I going to get her from California to me or me to California? I mean, it doesn't consume my day every day, but I mean, you do think about
It
that
makes you
stuff.
think.
I mean, does anybody else think about that? I mean, am I the only one, or am I crazy, or do you guys do the same thing too?
No, it's a realistic issue, and take myself, an emergency first responder. I'm out there working to help these people if there's some type of a disaster, and there's many more out there. And you both have been out there, and we're out there trying to do a job, and yet our families are far away, and what are they going to do? How are we going to get hooked up, depending what the emergency is? If we all recall, somewhere this last week, it was, Hawaii had that little accidental, bomb incoming issue that was sent out over text messages. Well, there was a lot of pandemonium there, and people, hysterical and running in here or there. People were lifting up the sore plates and going, down the ladders. And whoever would have thought that would have happened. But Jay, it's a realistic point. Do we think about this daily, or have we thought about it? What would happen if there was a disaster of some type? How would we meet up with our family if we're at work, they're at home, or they're at school? What do we do?
Yeah, and you bring up great points. So my daughter is up in college, so 2-hour drive, except for when there's snow and ice and power outages and the whole 9 yards. And if you think if you've never been through a hurricane or tornado, that will really open up your eyes. I've lived in Florida for a long time. And when you have no power for 4 weeks and you can't get water that's clean, and you can't keep a fridge cold, and you don't have a generator, you can't get gasoline into your car or into your generators, and people start supercharging $20 for a bag of ice. Do you have enough money in reserve for that kind of stuff? It really makes you think. So people that in Texas, right? Look at the disaster that happened in Texas and still going on right now in Puerto Rico. You better have your ducks in a row if you live in places like that, and be able to take. As I look into Jay's pantry, I see 5 cases of water stacked up. Jay, do you live in a desert just like I do in Arizona? Yep. So water better be a number one priority for people like us that live in a desert.
And again, it's not being paranoid. It's common sense. You just need to be prepared. And I don't think most Americans take that moment to sit back and think about preparedness and what might occur in the areas they live, what disasters they might face, what emergencies they might be faced with, and they're just not prepared.
Yeah, you don't have to, and just like Rich said earlier, you don't have to be paranoid. Don't be paranoid. Use your head. Use the resources, obviously, that are given to you. Listen, I'm a blue collar worker. I don't have a lot of money because I spend it all on guns, and my wife buys mice from the pet store. But at the same time, you need to start prioritizing these kinds of things. You should have ample food, rice and beans, stuff that keeps. Jay just brought out some chili mac with beef from the freeze-dried stuff where you just add water. Again, though, if you don't have water to boil to add to these things, then you're not doing yourself any good.
Yeah, you may not get that hot meal, but just having a bottled water to add to something and eat to sustain yourself for a couple of days is worth it. In my garage, I keep 2 generators, actually a 5,000 watt Generac, and then I keep that little 2,000 watt Honda generator. I keep tons of water, and I have canned food. Might it be what I want to eat for a week or 2? Beans? No, but if I have to, I have food I can sustain, and I also, of course, keep a lot of ammunition for the weapons that I do have.
And again, we're not sponsored by Snickers. However, we like them, and we would like to be sponsored by Snickers,
which is part of the M&M Mars company.
If you're listening, that's right. No, I mean, I think that for me is thinking about this stuff is I think people take it to this. They view being prepared, and it's kind of weird that not weird, I mean, it's good, but we've kind of gone to a different thing. And not a prepper show, but it still is, it's an emergency, and it doesn't matter. I think people think that being prepared is some zombie apocalypse thing. And the reality is that if you have a major, well, let's just take recently in the last 2 days, they had the earthquake, 8.2 earthquake up in Alaska. They had a tsunami warning in Hawaii. So it's possible that a natural disaster can happen that can wipe out power, water, any of those type of things. And it could be weeks before you get any of that stuff back. And so it's not just about, and I'm going to ask another question if anybody thinks the way that I do too, but it'll be funny to get the answer, you just have to prepare for those type of situations, I think, is to be ready for yourself and for your family. So I wander around and I look at individuals and I say, if something happened today, how many of these people would be able to make it 2-3 days without food, water, electricity? And there's a lot of people wandering around that couldn't, and so it goes to that whole thing is that what happens when people start panicking and those type of things? You got to start, really it's better for everybody if we're prepared a little bit, because that's what ends up happening. If you go 2 or 3 days without food, people start doing crazy stuff. So, just realize is that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. If you want to look at real live examples, look at New Orleans when those levees broke. That is a prime example of what, I'm sorry to say, what normal humans do. I know it's rough to take in and I know it sucks, but for whatever reason, that's what people think that they need, is to vandalize stores and to take other people's things that don't belong to them instead of helping out your fellow man. That's just, I'm sorry, it's the blunt truth. Maybe I'm off in left field, but I don't know. What do you guys think on that?
Well, I want to add to that topic, no matter where you live within the United States or even without of the United States there, I would suggest that for people's personal safety, which is really what we're all talking about, and it's, again, not being that over-prepared individual, but it's about being, personal safety is if you're given a warning by local law enforcement or by local government to evacuate an area for whatever reason, the facts is your house is just a piece of property. You have insurance to deal with what if issues might arise when you're not there. The most important thing is you and your family, and again, your personal safety. Get in your car and go to the next town or go to the next state and be safe, whatever emergency you might be, fleeing from, that it's suggested that you remove yourself from, and don't hesitate, because again, we have insurance to take care of our house if it gets vandalized, but you can't replace a family member or yourself.
No, absolutely. And all those things are really good points. And we covered a ton of territory in this conversation. We were talking about home defense, personal defense, and then we got into some preparedness thing, because it's just kind of all ends up flowing together. And prepared defensive action, again, doesn't necessarily mean that it's just an armed criminal threat. It's how you're prepared all the way around to react when something requires you to make an immediate action and an immediate change. So it could be, natural disaster threats. It could be a criminal threat with a weapon, but we need to be prepared. And so I think, Rich has brought up some really awesome points that, some that I hadn't even thought about, that, so it raises a question that we need to think about. And, I'd be interested to see what everybody else would say, is that, all right, so let's take the situation, Rich said, hey, get a PO box on your registration instead of your home address. If you're not going to do that, so how do you secure your registration to make sure that people, if everybody's expecting it to be in the glove box or above the visor, are you putting it somewhere else to make sure that somebody doesn't have easy access to it?
Well, here's a quick question since Rich is here. Rich, if I had my registration on my phone to show you just with my insurance card as a law enforcement officer, would you accept that?
Well, I would accept it. And I'll say officers are all not the same, but I don't know all the state laws out there. But reference Arizona, state law requires that you carry in your car to present to a police officer your registration and your insurance. Doesn't say you need to keep it in the glove box. You can tape it underneath in the carpet in the trunk someplace. You just have to be able to present it when asked. Now, Arizona with insurance, you can actually have your insurance on the phone on an electronic device. I don't know, and I can't answer reference registration, but obviously if that officer can match the name to the vehicle, he's going to be comfortable with that. But if you're loaning your car to someone else and they're driving down the road, that's the person you want to say, hey, just to let you know, if you get stopped for speeding or something, the registration is taped in the back, under the trunk, under this. I just don't want anyone to have access to my address. So it doesn't say you have to keep it in the glove box, just needs to be in the vehicle.
Yeah, so those are all really good things for everybody to think about. And I like I said, I'd be curious to hear what everybody else does to keep their vehicle, that information safe, somewhat of a security thing for them. And if they've heard of any other, I mean, that's the thing is we don't hear of everything. So I'd be curious if anybody's heard of any other kind of strange, consistent trends that are out there as far as what people are doing. I think it's important. So if you have anything, share it. But I think we cover some good territory, a lot of good information. As always, if you have any comments, make sure to comment in the comment section on our Facebook page that's tied to this podcast. I will make sure to put in the show notes information to the FBI stats. There was a cool garage door opener video that actually showed a thief, how he got in there and opened the door. So I'll put a post to that as well. And a link to the book by Gavin DeBecker, Gift of Fear. So everybody can do that. And a link to those door stoppers that we were talking about. So you can make sure you can check those out and pick them up.
Now, I don't know in your state or where you guys are listening from, but here in Arizona and Phoenix, again, I work out at C2, and they have a really cool class. It's a 3-day bag prep class, and you sign up for the class. So they show you how to set it up, and they talk about different things to carry in your 3-day pack. It is super cool. Again, we don't get anything from them, but again, the trainer Dave, he comes up with these really super cool classes, and I love to plug them because their classes really do make sense. I just like to thank Rich for stopping by and letting us pick his brain, and I think he's added a huge resource to the cast.
Well, I thank you, Mike, but I don't know if stopping by is the correct term or held against will. But no, I am glad that I'm able to add some information, and I just want to leave people with the thought of don't live in fear, don't be paranoid, but just use common sense and think about whatever it is you're doing, whatever situation you're in. Use common sense,
And that'll be a wrap for this episode of the Latent Force Prepared Defensive Action Podcast. Be sure to give us a like and a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or visit our website, www.latentforce.com, so you can get all the latest information from Latent Force. If you have any suggestions or comments on this show, or suggestions for a future show, shoot us an email to podcast@latentforce.com. On behalf of Mike Garza and myself, thank you for joining us. Be safe, and as always, stay in the fight.
Peace out.